Okay, so just before I hand over to Shahbaz, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody um, tuning in today, because today is the second Emerald Lounge series. Yesterday, thank you so much for those who joined in, which was almost like a pre-Ramadan soiree with a number of speakers ranging from Dr. Salim talking about the spiritual well-being, Myra Khan representing obviously the self-care, the mental health aspects, and we had the wonderful Inam Malik from Human Appeal talking about the charitable givings. Yes, there was almost that spiritual health and wealth. Today, continuing on the Ramadan series, we wanted to get everyone thinking, the countdown to Ramadan, only got a few days to go. However, this year, I know it's a phrase that's been used overboard, it's unprecedented, but genuinely is unprecedented times. And this Ramadan will be unlike no other. I'm absolutely convinced, but we obviously want to see the positives as best we can. And then when I was in discussion with Shahbaz, honestly, mashallah, fantastic to have the opportunity to squeeze in one more workshop before Ramadan. And the idea is preparing for Ramadan, but in isolation. That's the theme today. So I'm going to hand over to Shahbaz, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. Shahbaz as well, if there's any comments you can take along the way, or maybe we can save at the end, if that's okay.
Sure, that sounds excellent. Jazakallah khair, and thanks very much for having me on here. Rufal and I have known each other for a number of years now, and you know, Emerald has just grown. And every time I meet someone in the Emerald network, they're just so like warm and loving, and so it's great to be here with you all digitally, and sharing the love for. You know, the month of Ramadan. So I'm seeing like the number of participants slowly increasing. So inshallah, we'll just kind of make a start. So as Rufal mentioned, this session is really about how do we prepare for the month of Ramadan whilst being in a state of isolation, and really giving a spiritual and practical perspective as to how can we get ready for the month. And make the most of it. How do we worship Allah with the quality that He deserves? But how do we do that in such a challenging environment? And to be honest with you, you know, a lot of the, you know, the rhetoric that you see online with regards to, you know, this is now we have more time to worship God. I'm finding that I have less time to worship God. Because, you know, I have, you know, a little baby at home, you know, I have my wife to keep motivated. There is, you know, work and homeschooling and your parents to look after. So we have this additional pressure this Ramadan that we don't normally have in other Ramadans. So I'm going to try and shed some positive light, some practical tips over the next sort of 40 to 45 minutes. So you're all logged on in Zoom. I would encourage you all just to relax, grab a cup of tea or coffee, get some biscuits, get some smoothies, maybe even go for a walk whilst listening to this. Just make sure you put yourself on mute. But it will be a relaxed session. Please take it easy. And if you want to take some notes, you can get your notepad and pen or use your phone, etc. And inshallah, we can take it from there. So I guess like, you know, the first thing that I kind of like to kind of mention is that, you know, you being here is kind of like God's decision for you. So you saw the email or you saw something online and you wanted to register, you wanted to prepare for the month of Ramadan. So you've taken one step closer towards God. And with that, you know, God takes, you know, 10 steps closer to us at the same time. So you've started at least like with this positive step, you've taken 1 degree, you've moved 1 degree towards, you know, the direction of where God is. And, you know, and God talks about this in the Quran. He says, and you did not throw when you threw, rather it was God who threw. So, you know, every tiny decision that you make, everything that you do to try and come closer to God, that's God kind of divinely pushing you to come closer to Him. And that's a beautiful gift, and that's a beautiful situation to be in. So by way of introduction, my name is Shahbaz Mirza, and my accent's a bit different because I'm up north in Scotland. And I'm a bit of a mixed bag, a bit of a, you could say like a Clark Kent Superman type figure, because during the day I work professionally in the field of finance and technology. I've been doing so for like the past 10 years or so now. But, you know, at night, I love to get involved in Islamic projects, continue my Islamic studies and my learnings, and do a lot of, you know, educational work for the community, especially for young Muslim millennials like ourselves on the call. And Rufal is still classified as a millennial. And so it's really about how do we bring focus to our faith amongst the challenging environment that we're in you know, the 21st century, and how do we make Islam relevant to the life that we're living today. So I've not been brought up in like the madrasa. I'm not going to tell you things out of context. I'm going to make sure that everything that I say is relevant, and I'm normal as well. I love movies, love video games, love fighting sports and all the rest of it. So I'm going to give you a really down-to-earth and practical perspective in terms of your faith, your life, and how do you balance both of them. So over the next like kind of 35 minutes or so, I really wanted to kind of cover off on these 4 key areas. The first is really talking about, you know, this idea of isolation. You know, it's funny, like whenever, you know, historically in Islam, amongst all of the stories of the prophets, and whenever they were in a state of isolation, miracles would happen. So we want to explore why that is. Then we're going to kind of tackle a real topical issue, which is like, do we go with the flow or do we have a structured Ramadan? And I'm going to try and sort of push you to have a structured Ramadan, and give you some really strong reasons as to why. And then I'm going to kind of explore another question, which is, you know, if I have this Ramadan plan, I'm in isolation, I've got all these challenges, am I a bad Muslim if I'm only doing the basic acts of worship, right? Does that mean that there's something wrong with me? And that's a real kind of key question to address, because I think that, you know, in the community and, you know, socially and, you know, the fabric of society that we live in, especially when it comes to Islam, it's like, you know, if you're not praying, you know, hours every night, there's something wrong with your iman, but that's not true. So I want to kind of counter that. And finally, go through a daily structure for success in the month of Ramadan. So let's begin. But before we begin, I just kind of want to put something in your mind, right? So Ramadan could potentially start tomorrow night, right? So no, everyone's going to be in Facebook and Twitter, or Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and they're going to be like, you know, is Ramadan started yet? Is Ramadan started yet? You know, has my local mosque announced, or do we just wait for Saudi to announce? And you know, this year, that announcement's going to be made, and what do you do? Like you can put it in the chat box. Like, what is the first thing that you're going to do? Because normally, like your dad will take you to the masjid for Taraweeh, or your mum, or you would, you know, organize something at home. You would do what you would normally do, but now it's completely different, right? It's like it's announcement and you're still stuck at home. So what I would like for you to do, like, is just in the chat box, if you could just share, like, what would be the first thing that comes into your mind once Ramadan is announced? Like, what will you do? Like, what is the very first thing that's going to come into your mind? So a few people are saying, like, Alhamdulillah, which is great. If you have any questions, again, in the chat box, please ask away. Okay, so some people are saying that they're going to prepare for Taraweeh that night. They're going to do that self-Taraweeh. And really, that is the important thing here, right? You know, when that month of Ramadan is announced, you know, it's funny, right? This comes back to that whole process argument that I'm going to go through later on. You know, the first thing is actually we're supposed to look at the moon and recite a dua where we say, you know, you're actually speaking to the moon and you're saying, oh Allah, make the new moon rise upon us with felicity and safety and submission, my Lord and your Lord. So you're actually having a conversation with the moon, and you're saying to the moon, can you bring this month of safety and felicity and blessings into my life? Because you and I, we have the same Lord, right? So there's a process for everything within Islam. Like when you do your wudu, when you do your prayer, there's a process for everything. But when the month of Ramadan comes, it's like, it's just that kind of like, the fire alarm is went, and no one's forming an orderly line to go to the safety zone, right? It's kind of like, everyone's in panic mode. So really want to help you to have that structured plan in place. And if you even think about that dua, and I want you to keep this in your mind, why is it that we're talking to the moon as soon as Ramadan arrives? Why are we saying my Lord and your Lord? Why do we have that conversation? So inshallah, I want you to kind of keep that in your mind. So let's go through these 4 key areas. So the first key area is about isolation, miracles, and the cave. So it's funny, right, that Imam Ghazali actually speaks about this power of being in a state of isolation. And he says this in one of his famous books. It's called Disciplining the Soul. And Imam Ghazali says that there's 4 pedestals, there's 4 pillars to getting closer to God. And one of those pillars is to be in a state of isolation. And the other 3 are hunger, sleeplessness, and silence. And so when you think about, these 4 key conditions, right, these 4 key pillars or steps to getting closer to God, we actually find that all of these are present in the month of Ramadan, that we're all hungry or hangry, as I like to call it, because I definitely get hangry. We're all in a state of sleeplessness because we're trying to pray at night. The coffee withdrawal symptoms kick in, and we're getting up early in the morning for work at the same time. We're in a state of isolation because, to be honest, we can't really be bothered with anyone. We cannot be bothered with anyone and anything. We just kind of want to be ourselves because we kind of got that withdrawal symptoms. And 4th is that we're in this state of silence naturally. So what Imam Ghazali is saying is that these 4 conditions are so key to getting close to God, and isolation is one of those conditions. And so when you think about the stories of the prophets, right, if we take the story of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that, when he was in a state of isolation, which was in the cave, right, and I want you to really think about this cave analogy. When he was in that cave, literally the biggest miracle, the biggest revelation happened that's ever existed in the history of mankind, where the Quran was revealed. And if you think about this miracle, right, this idea of miracles happen when we're in this state of isolation. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was in a state of isolation. The Quran was revealed. What was the Quran? The Quran was a miracle for mankind. A miracle happened to the Prophet whilst he was in the state of isolation. So we have this theme in the month of Ramadan where we're actually all in this state of isolation. Miracles can happen in that state of isolation. And the Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan, which is a miracle in of itself. And so what we find if we take a step back and we eliminate the fact that we're bored out of our head, that people in our house are like struggling because of boredom and issues and not being able to get out, get some fresh air even. Our parents are stuck at home, we're worried for them. Spiritually, if we think about things that, we're actually in this state that is fertile for miracles to happen in our life. And that's really, really key to bear in mind. And the second thing is that when every prophet was in a state of isolation, the angels were amongst them to help them with the struggles that they were going through. And so if we take 2 examples, beautiful examples that I love to share. If we take the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, when the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was pushed into the well, right? If you can imagine that you're walking in your garden, there's a huge well, and your siblings would push you in. And I know my siblings would love to push me inside a well. And they push you inside the well, and it's really deep and dark. There's no end to it. Like, there is no guarantee that you're going to survive that fall. So why is it that the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam survived that fall in the well? And we know from the Quran that it was actually the angel Jibreel that caught the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam before he got to the bottom of the well. And that's how he survived the fall. And whilst he was there, it was the angel Jibreel that actually helped him to nurture and protect him and provide him with what he needs so that he could survive the time that he was in the well. And we actually don't know how long he was in the well for. And if you take another story, a story of a woman, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when she was running between Safa and Marwa, right? When you go on Hajj and Umrah, you're running between Safa and Marwa. She's struggling for water. She didn't have any water left. She looked at her snakeskin water bottle, nothing left, right? She had a snakeskin one, so that's even better than what we have these days with all our funky water bottles. Again, she was struggling. She was in a state of isolation. So what happened? She was scurrying in the sand, and all of a sudden, Zamzam came forth. How is it that when she's scurrying in the sand, Zamzam came forth? Like, if you think of this physically, how did that actually happen? And as we know from the Quran, it was actually the angel Jibreel alayhi salam that tapped his heel on the sand, and that's what caused the miracle to happen, the Zamzam, the miracle water within our religion. And so again, story of isolation, a story of struggle, miracles happen. And so we're all in the struggle right now. We're in our homes, and you know what? It is a struggle. It's a struggle for me as well, with the wife, little kid, having to run back and forth, driving between cities, looking after my mum and dad, full-time work, and you guys have got all of this on as well. But with that struggle comes a miracle, and I want you to really hold on for that miracle in the month of Ramadan. So with that, we've got this idea of miracles can happen. We've got this idea that isolation can be seen as a positive, sense of being to be in. And in fact, all of the scholars, when they did their best work, when all of these amazing like hadith were compiled, Bukhari, Muslim, all the rest of it, they were all done whilst these guys were in isolation. So all of these amazing ideas and stuff that you have that you've always wanted to do, have a think about starting that whilst you have this isolation kind of mode, whilst you have this kind of gift of isolation in your life. So the second thing that we want to go on to is this idea of, should I go with the flow in Ramadan? Because everything is up in the air, right? Everything is chaotic. Everything is so unstructured. When I wake up in the morning, I'm not going to work. I'm literally waking up, I'm showering, I'm going back to my bedroom and sitting and doing my work. There's no break whatsoever, right? It's literally like mind numbing. And so it's kind of like, do I have a structure or should I just go with the flow? And you will know that when you go with the flow, things are all over the place and you don't feel like you're tangibly getting things done. But when you have a structure, you're comfortable, you know what you need to achieve, you feel good at the end of the night, and you're mindful spiritually, and you're mindful even like mentally as well at the same time, because you know that you're not taking on extra things and that you know that you have a set plan in place. And so what we find is that, this idea of going with the flow versus having a structure is really something that we need to try and address, because naturally we will all want to go with the flow this Ramadan, because everything is up in the air and everything is left to our individual selves as well. No one is pushing us to open up our laptop at 9 o'clock in the morning for work. No one is pushing us to travel to work. No one is pushing us to go to Taraweeh at the masjid. So it's going to be super easy for anyone in the evening to be like, I'm going to switch on Netflix. I'm going to watch something. I'm going to play video games. And I know that I would be tempted to do that. I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to go to Taraweeh, especially when it comes to like day 10, day 15 of Ramadan. Like it's all going to go like downhill from there. It happens all the time. We go to the gym for a week. After a week, we're either motivated or we're like, you know what, I just really need a break right now. So how do we stay consistent in the month of Ramadan? And so there's kind of two things that I really want to share with you to encourage you, to like compel you to have a structure for this Ramadan. Because later on, I'm going to say to you, this is how you have a structure for Ramadan. But before that, you're probably going to be like, well, do I need a structure? I don't need a structure. Long hair, don't care. I'm going to go with the flow. But I'm going to really try and encourage you to make a structure for the month of Ramadan. And here is why. The reason why is because everything in life has a structure. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the planets, the heavens, the earth, the day and the night, the moon and the sun, the sky and the sea and the grass, the animals on land, the animals on sea, the sweet water and the salty water, everything has a process. The sun and the moon and the stars, the planets, the way that they revolved around the earth, the way that everything just works on earth, everything has a process. But what we also find is that it doesn't just have a process, but they also worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know that the moon and the sun and the stars and the planets, they're all in constant worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that the angels are also in constant worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what we have, right, is we have this universal, order of affairs, right? We have this order of affairs in the universe that everything, God has appointed every single thing to work in a certain way. And that comes back to the dua that we were saying, that I mentioned to you at the start, right? When we look at the moon and we say, oh Allah, make the new moon rise and help it to increase me in felicity and faith, your Lord and my Lord, right? And so the reason why we say that is we're actually saying to the moon that we know that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly, you follow this process, and now I'm going to start following this process as well. And so what we find is that in hadith, we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually, he gives us a process to love him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives us a process to love him, right? He gives us a structure to love him. And we know this in a famous hadith by Imam Nawawi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says to us, if you want to love me, like in order to actually build love for me, then all you need to do is follow the obedient acts of worship that I've ordained you to follow, which is the prayers, the zakah, the fasting, the hajj, and the overall belief in faith as well. And so what we find is that God is giving us a process, but throughout the past 11 months, we haven't really followed a process, right? The way that we tackle Ramadan, we haven't tackled that in the other 11 months. So we're coming back full circle. We're coming to the month of Ramadan, and it's like God is now forcing us, right? Al-Jabbar, he's compelling us to go back into having a structured, processed life for our worship. The same way that the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets and the angels and the trees and the plants and the bees all worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's now forcing us to worship him as well. And so what happens is that we're now forced to come into this universal order of affairs. So it's kind of funny, right? When we do our prayers, we think that our day is being disrupted. When we do Ramadan, when we do zakah or hajj or whatever it is, we think that our lives are being disrupted. We think that this is something separate to our universal life. But actually that act, that reading of the Quran, that dhikr, that prayer is actually plugging us back into the universe. The same way that the sun and the moon and the stars and the plants and the birds and the bees worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day, constantly in worship of him. This idea where we're compelled to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a process, 5 times a day, fasting every day, trying to pray every night. God is forcing us to go back into this process, this structure to worship him. But why is he compelling us to do that? He's compelling us to do that so that we can love him again, right? In the hadith, do these things and you will build this love for me again. And so it's funny, right? We're in this age of inspiration junkies, right? Even myself, I want to be motivated before I do something. What's God telling us? He's like, do the doing first, right? Go to the gym first and then you see results, right? Don't buy the best gym gear and your protein shakes and your protein bars and don't do anything and think you're going to get fit. God is saying, do the work first, follow the process, trust the process that he's given for us, and then you will see the results. You will feel that khushu, you will feel that barakah, you will feel that blessing, you will feel that love in your life for him, but not only for him, for the other things in your life as well. And so this is that whole argument of having a structure for the month of Ramadan. So before we even go on to that structure, you're probably thinking, you know what, Shahbaz, like, I've got way too many things on. I've just got way too many things on. I've got work. I'm really senior in my career. I've got a business to run. I've got bills to pay, bro. I've got so many things to do. And you know what? I can't do this super Muslim thing. I can't do it. I can't do this super Muslim thing. I can't be the best at being a Muslim at all aspects of my life. And I feel that this kind of like expectation is put upon, every single Muslim in the community. And it's like, you go to the mosque, you've got you've got like tight jeans on, that's it, you're told off. And this happens in the community. And so what I really want to try and do is I want to give you some love and peace, some guidance and some ease in your heart, that this year, Ramadan, it will be tough. It's going to be tough for me as well. There's going to be extra things that we have to do because we're in this COVID challenge. And so the key question here is that if I'm not doing all the extra things that I would normally do in the month of Ramadan, am I a bad Muslim, right? Am I a bad Muslim? And so what we have here is we have this idea that if I'm not exerting myself, if I don't follow this all branched out structure, am I a bad Muslim for not doing that? And so, obviously, you know what I'm going to say to you, right? I'm going to say to you that the answer is that you're not a bad Muslim, but I'm going to completely flip that on its head. I'm going to say to you that even if you miss obligatory acts of worship, even in the month of Ramadan, that means even your 5 prayers, that you are actually still considered a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we see this in this quote, right, in this ayah in the Quran. And the way that I like to explain this is, right, that we almost like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has these like 3 circles, right? On the outer circle is like the friend zone, right? You're in the friend zone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then on that inner circle, the middle one, it's like you're in the inner circle with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Extra things that the people in the friend zone, they don't really get these extra things, but you're still, you're in the inner circle. And then you've got like the BFFs with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people that are so close to him, right? That they know everything, they follow their whole life, being spiritually close to God. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he describes these 3 kind of key groups of people that are close to him in this one ayah in the Quran. It's in Surah Fatir in verse 32, and it's up on the screen at the moment. And so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that we have chosen of our servants. So he's like saying, I've got 3 groups of friends. The first group is the friend zone. These are people that are still wrong. They still wrong themselves. So what does that mean? They're still good people. They worship God, but every so often they miss out on those obligatory acts. God knows that you've got a tough life, that you're going to be up all night. You're not going to get the best sleep every single night of your life. You will miss Fajr in your life. You will miss it. You'll miss Isha. You'll fall asleep. You'll fall into error. But he's saying, it doesn't matter. I know you will do that, but you're still in the friend zone. You're still a friend of myself. And so that's a beautiful thing, right? That sometimes, we miss these obligatory acts of worship. We might not read the Quran every day in the month of Ramadan, but what is God saying? He's saying, it doesn't matter. You're still in the friend zone. And then what is the second level? The second level is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and among them are people who are moderate. What does that mean? That means those are the people who are in the inner circle. They do all of the obligatory acts of worship. They're so consistent, they very rarely miss them out. So we're talking about fasting, praying, reading the Quran, etc. But what also they do is that they don't fall into sin. So the normal sins that they do, whether they're, they're going out at night, doing the things that they shouldn't be doing, all the rest of it, you know, disrespecting their parents, etc. They don't do any of that, right? They don't do any of that. But what also they don't do is that they don't excel in their actions, right? They don't excel in their actions. They do the basics. They avoid all the haram. They're in the inner circle. And then what God says is that there's even a level beyond that. And those are my BFFs. Those are those people who are in, you know, closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're the foremost, they're the closest to me because they do all of the amazing acts of worship. So they do all the obligatory stuff. They don't sin, but they do all of the extra stuff as well. And those are the ones that are closest to me. So what are we saying here? We're saying that God is giving us 3 stages to worshiping him and being obedient to him, but also fasting in the month of Ramadan. That the key thing here, right, is to try and hit the obligatory acts of worship. The second thing is to avoid the sinning. And the third thing is to do those things, but then do all the extra things as well. And so what happens is in the month of Ramadan, we love praying Taraweeh at night because it's just cool, right? It is cool, spiritual high, all the rest of it. But then we miss our Fajr, we have a lazy day, we don't read Quran and all the rest of it. God's saying don't do that. God is saying get your basics right first, right? Get your deadlifts and your squats right first before you start doing all of these P90X extra training programs. Get the basics right first, then stop doing all the things that are going to harm the basic things that you're doing, and then do all the extra stuff. So am I a bad Muslim for not exerting myself in Ramadan? No, you're not a bad Muslim. You are actually still a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not only that, is that you actually have this process now. You have this structure and you have this journey, right, to getting closer to God as well. You're not going further away from God. You're only going to get closer to him. I can see some chat, some questions. So inshallah, there will be time at the end to do some questions, and I'll kind of make sure that I go through each and every one of them. So now that I've kind of convinced you, hopefully convinced you to have a daily structure for success in Ramadan, you know, isolation is perfect spiritual opportunity. Miracles can happen for your life. You know what? You know, my brother, his business has been struggling for the past 3 years. In the last 2 days, I'm not even joking, in the last 2 days, his business shot up 600% in sales. And you know what? Because he's been struggling for the past 3 years, he's constantly been turning to God in the past 3 years. And in 2 days, he's made more money than he did in the past 6 months. That is what God brings to us in our life when we obediently, consistently worship him just because we love him, and we're kind of hoping that something is going to come back into our life. And so we need to have this consistent worship with God. How do we do that? In the month of Ramadan. So what we have here, right, is there's a typo. This is a 7-point plan. This is a 7-point plan that I want each and every one of you to follow in the month of Ramadan. I'm going to go through these kind of very briefly. We've got around 10 minutes left. The first thing is called the golden minute, right? No one does this, and I want every single one of us to do this. It's called the golden minute. You know, the scholars, what they used to do is they used to have a cup of coffee before praying all night. And when they were having that cup of coffee, before they had the cup of coffee, they would make an intention that through drinking this cup of coffee, they're going to be able to stay up and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. And so one of the scholars actually wrote a whole book on this. It was called the Book of Intentions. And even one of the chapters is about how can we drink coffee with the intention to worship God and get rewarded at the exact same time. And so what we have here, right, is we have this golden minute. We're waking up and we're going to work, or we're working from our bedrooms, living rooms, kids' rooms, kitchen. But through doing that work, through taking a golden minute, like literally 60 seconds before you start that work, take the golden minute and affirm the intention that you're doing that work to get some money, to pay the bills, do good stuff with that money, live a prosperous life and worship God. And that 9 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever you do working, or whether it's with your business, you will get worship for that. You will get deeds banked for doing that. So whether you're feeding your son, or whether you're looking after the kids, homeschooling them, watering your plants, whatever you do in the month of Ramadan, every single thing that you do, take the golden minute, right? We call it the golden minute, and just think about why you're doing what you're doing, set the intention, and you're going to get the reward for that. Even sleeping, right? I think you guys already know this, but even when you sleep, and you sleep with the intention that you're resting so that, you know, you're kind of like, then you can wake up afresh and worship God, you get that whole time that you're sleeping, you get reward for that as long as you're sleeping in wudu. So even when you're sleeping right, you can get reward. So take that golden minute. The second thing is to visualize the day. So when you wake up in the morning, and whether you're waking up at Fajr or after Fajr and you're starting your day then, or whether you start your day at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 noon, 1 p.m., whatever you do, take some time to visualize the day. What is going to make this day amazing, right? That's really important, because for each and every one of us, we have these kind of series of habits or actions that we think which will make this day absolutely incredible. So for me, it's like making sure that I read the Quran. I kind of need to have this engagement with the Quran. If I think, you know what, if I read the Quran today, that's going to be a good day. Also, exercising for me is so critical. Going for a run every day is literally critical to my psyche. If I don't go for a run, I think, whoa, man, I'm going to get fat, and I feel like I'm literally losing my mind. And so there are key things, right, that kind of come into my mind for that ideal day when it comes to my work and my worship. So take some time to visualize, what does that day look like every day in the month of Ramadan, and literally take time. I'm saying literally like 5-10 minutes, just sit there, close your eyes and think about, what is my ideal day? And take 5 to 10 minutes, visualize it, and write down. Step 3 is write down what are all of those things that you need to do to get to that ideal day. And so you might think about things like, you know, I really want to get up for Fajr. I really want to make sure I eat suhoor, pray Fajr, read a little bit of Quran, and then I'm going to go to sleep and wake up later on. I really want, that's my ideal day. Write it down. So what we have now is like, we have this daily structure for success, but also it's personal to us. So now we have this list of all of these things that we really want to do. And the first thing to do is to then schedule what's mandatory, right? We've already talked about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's saying, right, focus on the things that are obligatory, right? Do all those things amazing. If you pray your Isha prayer at night, and you take like a good solid half an hour and you do it really well, and you do dhikr after it, you make a long dua after it, and after that you go to bed and you forget about the Taraweeh prayer, it's better for you than rushing your Isha prayer and then praying all night and then missing Fajr, right? So schedule in your diary, literally on your phone, use your calendar, on your iPad, on your MacBook, on, you know, a planner, on your notepad, whatever it is that you use, diarize, schedule it in, all of those things that you need to do mandatorily, praying the Fajr prayer, reading Quran, hitting your Ramadan goals, your Taraweeh evening routine, going for that walk during the day, looking after the kids, whatever it is that you need to do. Also your working pattern as well. If you're working 9 to 4, 9 to 5, schedule that in your diary so you know how much time you have available. And then after that, after you've blocked off, here are all the mandatory things that I need to do. Then schedule in what's important for you to do as well, right? So that might be those things like going for that run, going for that walk, making sure that you're taking an hour a day just to have a mental break, visiting your parents, doing your charity work, doing all those important things. And then the sixth kind of step is schedule all those extra things, right? Those are kind of like the cream or the cherry on the top. These are the kind of things that you want to do, but you know what? Like if you don't do them, the world's not going to end. Everything's still going to be fine. And then at the end, making sure that, each day in the month of Ramadan, even scheduling this in, whether you just make it a part of your habit after you pray Isha at night, after you do your Taraweeh prayer at night at home or wherever it is, that you take some time to reflect. This is so important because Ramadan is a rush, right? It's such a rush. And what I would encourage every person to do is literally, 5-minute journal style at the end of each night is reflect on how the day has went. And because we're with our families, our wives, our children, whether we're doing stuff alone, even reflecting alone is probably the best kind of reflection, is take 5 minutes to reflect each night. How is my Ramadan doing, right? Can I do better what I did today? And practice self-reflection, which is called tafakkur in Arabic, which means to reflect on yourself and to reflect on God. Am I doing what God wants me to do? And this is so important that, I remember like I used the 5-minute journal, right? Every morning and every evening, I reflected on what I want to do and what have I achieved. And so what I want you to think about, shifting that mindset and thinking about when you wake up in the morning, what does God want me to do today? And at the end at night, have I done what God had wanted me to do? Right? So those are key questions that you should have in your mind, not just in the month of Ramadan, but also after the month of Ramadan as well. So some of you had sent in questions in advance on Instagram and stuff like that. So one of the questions was, how much Quran do I need to read? Read that should read not ready. How much Quran do I need to read every day? So again, it's up to you. God never said you need to read 1 juz a day. I don't read 1 juz a day because for me, it's important to whatever I read, that I know what I'm reading and I know the meaning behind what I'm reading as well. So literally on my iPad, this is what I do in Ramadan. I go to this app, Quran Majid. This is it here. And it's got all of the ayat numbered. And I'll read I think I read around 50 verses a day. It's all I read. But I'll read the English and I'll read the tafsir behind it as well, because I want to know like what I'm reading. I'll read the English really carefully and the Arabic as well, so that I can kind of dissect what I'm reading rather than robotically just reading 1 juz a day. And so we know that the scholars used to, finish Quran like twice, thrice, 10, 15 times in the month of Ramadan alone. I'm not that level, and maybe you're not at that level as well. So read what you can read. There's even an ayah in the Quran in Surah Al-Muzammil, verse number 20, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he actually says, he goes, look, I know that the night's going to be hard for you. I know that you can't worship me all night. So read that which from the Quran that is easy for you, right? He goes, read from the Quran that is easy for you. So he doesn't even say, read 1 juz, finish the Quran 10, 20 times a year, read, 5 juz a day, 1 juz a day. He doesn't say that. He says, read with that of the Quran, which is easy for you. The second question is, how do I pray Taraweeh at home? And this is like a big question, because it depends on which of the schools of thought that you follow, right? So whether you're Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, or Hanbali, right? So, generally when you're praying Taraweeh at home, you would pray, between 8 to 20 rakah. And what I guess the number one question on people's mind is, if I don't know that much Quran, what do I do then? Well, you can repeat the same surahs of the Quran, but what you can actually do is you can read from a book, or you can read from your phone as well. So this is an opinion according to some Shafi'i scholars. So I've also like studied like the fiqh of, you know, the essential, like the sciences, the fiqh of Islam. And so the Shafi'i scholars said, Imam Shafi'i said that you can, when you're doing a voluntary prayer, which is Taraweeh, you can actually read from something. But also you would need to follow, you'd have to do your prayer in accordance to what the Shafi'i school would do their prayers. And so what you have to do is, before you say Surah Al-Fatiha, you would have to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Like, you have to say that out loud, and you would have to take your time with the Fatiha, because they really emphasize taking time. And then once you're reading, and you can read from the Quran or a tablet or an app, you can read from that device or book in the Taraweeh prayer. And so what you would do is you would be following the Shafi school of thought when it comes to doing your Taraweeh prayers at home. And that's like the legal, the fiqh opinion that's been given to that. But if you are like a Hanafi or whatever it is, and you're kind of dead set on being that school of thought, you can actually take the dispensation to praying your Taraweeh prayer at home in accordance with the Shafi'i school of thought. So there's always a dispensation. You have your default school that you follow, your default following, but you can also always switch to something else when it's convenient for you, when it makes your life easier and simpler. And so again, there's a dispensation for that. So I'm just going to switch to the chat box now and see if there are any questions. Okay, so someone's asking anonymously, Assalamu alaikum, I cannot read in Arabic. Would it suffice to read the Quran in English? Yes, it is. Of course, like, it's funny, my dad can't read Arabic because he's got, learning difficulties and things like that. He's registered disabled. But he actually wrote a book on the English translation of the Quran. And it was published in, all the libraries in the UK. And he doesn't know how to read in Arabic. So again, that should hopefully just be some small inspiration for you, that you can understand the Quran through reading the English, and go so far as to writing a book on it and getting recognized and awards and everything for it as well, even though you can't read it in Arabic. But again, I would encourage you to learn the Arabic part as well. Of course, we can record and upload it on Facebook as well. Okay, so that's in the Q&A. I'm just going to go to the actual chat box, inshallah, and see for questions. Any questions that you guys have? Revising du'as I have not used for a while. Yes, so there's a question here. What about the one who fulfills all the duties but sins sometimes too and repents? Can't they be in the inner BFF aisle? So no, you can't. So it's clear. So that's like in the ayah in the Quran, it's saying that, look, if you're doing all of your obligatory acts of worship and sometimes you're missing them and you're sinning, you're in that friend zone, you're on the outer circle. Once you stop the sinning and you're doing all of your obligatory acts of worship and you're not doing anything else, then you're in the middle zone, the inner circle. But once you exceed in all of your actions and stop the sinning, that's when you're in that BFF zone. So again, it's showing you that kind of how should we conduct our day-to-day affairs. Again, it goes back to that whole inspiration junkie thing where we want to do all the extra things, but we don't focus on that basics, right? And it kind of does come back to the basics, right? If we think about our whole year that we've done, right? And we think about just the Fajr prayer, which is obligatory, right? And we think about how many times have we prayed it and how many times have we not prayed it. It's probably like a 50-50. And so how many times have we now read the Quran after the Fajr prayer or started our day after the Fajr prayer? So again, it's like, it's almost like maybe 10% of the year. What does BFFs mean? It means best friends forever. So it's just another kind of like a play on words to show that those are the people that are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what he's trying to say in that ayah of the Quran. Again, just kind of finishing up, any other kind of like literally like practical tips and apps that you can use. So for the Quran, there is the Quran Majid app. Here are all of the apps that I kind of use, right? So there's this app called Quran Majid. There's another app called My Dua. And that's basically got a list of all the du'as that you need, you know, when you see the moon, when you're fasting, when you're asking God for certain things. My Dua, it's a great app. And there's also the Ramadan Legacy app, which you can use, which gives you a daily structure for each day in Ramadan. And yeah, there's like loads of kind of other ones, new ones out there as well. So yeah, that kind of comes to the end of it. Rufal, see you back. Your shining face, mashallah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shahbaz. Honestly, mashallah, really, really inspiring to go for it, and especially in terms of the language. It was almost everyday analogies, which I really, really liked, and I hope everyone did enjoy that. But a number of, just a few more questions I've noticed. Somebody said, let's have a look, I think it's Shabina. Let's have a look. Shabina, she said, or asked, any further advice on involving young children in Ramadan? So it's from a family perspective.
That's a great question. So there's actually this great book, and I bought this for all my nieces and nephews, and it's by the brand called Learning Roots, which I'm sure most of you know. And so they have this Ramadan activities book. There's one for 5 to 7-year-olds, and there's another one for 8 to 11-year-olds. So if you actually go into the Learning Roots website, and when you're purchasing the Ramadan activity book, you can use the code Legacy 20 and get 20% off, because we have like a good partnership with them. I'm just going to put that in the chat. So it's an amazing book. So it literally gives you like over 100 activities to do with your children in the month of Ramadan. So even if your child is you know, less than 5 years old, you can still use the 5 to 7-year-old one, because it's got loads of kind of activities that you can tailor. So it gives you like 129 activities, and you can choose which one you want to do. It's got stickers, everything. Is amazing. I would definitely purchase that. It's called, I'll just put it here, it's called the Ramadan activity book by Learning Roots. Okay, awesome.
Brilliant
Any
stuff.
other questions, Rufal?
I'm just trying to think. Yeah, someone was inquiring about the name of the book, so obviously you've just put that in there. Here we go. Let's just go back. Oh, will you make the digital version of the Ramadan Legacy Planner? Is that your app already, or?
Yeah, I guess so. We don't have a digital version of the planner, like a PDF, but you can download the Ramadan Legacy app. It's for free on iOS and Android, and you just sign up, and you'll basically get this kind of similar to the journal, but less of the whole reflective stuff, more of here's a checklist every day for Ramadan for you to follow.
Brilliant, fantastic. And then in Anonymous says they didn't finish journalizing Ramadan Legacy last year, lasted 6 days. Will the QR codes work or something? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the QR codes in the planner last year, they're the same. They're still live. So it's literally like little QR codes. So it takes you through little video guides throughout the planner. So yeah, if you still got up to day 6 last year, you can just reuse it from last year. There's only a few extra sections involved in this year's planner. So reuse last year, recycle, and save the planet, definitely.
Brilliant stuff, fantastic. And I think we've got the last couple of ones. I don't know if you can see, Shahbaz, on the chat thread. The 3 zones.
And who is in them, and is there a graphic for that? What I can do is I'll make a graphic, because I'm kind of really passionate about that kind of certain thing, and I'll tag in Emerald Network on Instagram. Brilliant. And then so make sure that you follow Emerald Network on Instagram, follow Ramadan Legacy, and you'll see the graphic, inshallah, definitely.
Brilliant stuff, fantastic. And then I think the last one was, how many times must I recite the suggested Ramadan du'as in the planner?
Yeah, it's a great question. So they're generally to be recited as often as you need them. So there's one for like overcoming laziness in the month of Ramadan. So, you know, this is probably something that we can say every day. I'll be reciting that every day. And, you know, for du'as for breaking your fast. There's one that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would regularly recite. And so it's not just a one-off thing. Here's what I do at the start of Ramadan, and then I don't cite them again. It's like Google Maps, right? This planner, everything is like Google Maps. Like you're driving, but you're constantly looking at where you're going. So you have to have that kind of mentality in your mind.
Brilliant stuff. Fantastic. Great analogy, because yesterday's webinar, Dr. Salim, he actually mentions it's almost like the Quran is like equivalent to Waze or Google Maps. It's our guidance that we take for granted, obviously. And it's not just for Ramadan, it is for life, as they say, in that sense. So brilliant. And honestly, I think we don't have any more questions, which is great, because we almost come to the end now. But I just wanted to say, Jazakallah, Shahbaz, honestly, I really can't stress. We've had a number of people mentioning how it's inspirational and had no expectations for this webinar. So it was brilliant that we exceeded expectations, which is great. And I think the main thing is, as I said, again, using the analogies and reminders, you know, it's a case of being productive every day, striving for excellence, visualizing things. It shouldn't be just for obviously the 30 days. It should be, as I said, anytime. It's those habits that we pick up, or the bad habits, as we say, and we fall down. Obviously, we can beat ourselves up, but that's not going to help the mental health and the productivity and the mindset. It will probably take us further away from Islam, kind of thing. So it's great that you've just reminded people in terms of putting sinning into concept, reminding us on the obligations. And as I said, you can, you know, like your gym context, you know, you can have all the gear but no idea, you know, in that sense. So it's nice that you just say, you know what, get the basics right, get the fundamentals right, which is a fantastic reminder. So mashallah, you know, we have honestly amazing, superficial. I didn't expect anything better, obviously, because it's like, you know, the, you know, efficiency. We've reached almost at the hour, but what we will do for those who've missed it, we've had issues of going Facebook Live at the same time. So we are going to keep the recording and then we'll share it on ours. And then any other graphics or anything, any special offers. You haven't even mentioned your planner. So I know you probably sold out. Have you sold out?
Sold out, yeah, that's why.
Strategically, but no, mashallah, it's amazing. I mean, just from an aesthetic point of view is one thing, but obviously the content itself, you know, really, really rich content and practical reminders. And inshallah, you know, when it's back next year, obviously we will definitely push and promote it. And anything else throughout the year, even if it's quarterly or almost like an end of year reflection, if there's something you wanted to collaborate with Emeralds, I'm sure our people will be loving to hear from you again.
Thank you so much, Rufal. And, you know, I pray you and the family's safe. And I know we were supposed to even meet up and work together and all this craziness happened. So definitely for next year, if we're not in lockdown, I don't even know. But yeah, wishing you and your family and all your people in Emerald Network the best of strength and health and safety and just mentality, like positivity as well. Like it's a tough time.
Fantastic. Jazakallah again, and same likewise for yourself and your family. And obviously recently, mashallah, I don't want to embarrass you now, you had your 3rd anniversary, I think it was. Which is fantastic. Congratulations.
Married, so alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. This is fantastic. Brilliant stuff. So thank you so much again, Jazakallah. And honestly, really, really means a lot. We've had people from absolutely all over the place join us, and I know we've had, I think, some friends from France, I think it was as well, which is brilliant. I'll just double check very quickly the last couple of seconds. Any more questions? No, I think we're there on the questions. So thank you so much to everybody. Yes, we've got greetings from Germany as well, which is fantastic. So there we go. Greetings from Germany, greetings from Paris. So mashallah,
and bonjour.
Ireland as well. So thank you so much. Saudi, mashallah. So that's it. We're relying on the moon sighting. No pressure.
Yeah, I know.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Much. Honestly, really, really humbled by the relatively short notice. We did it short notice, but because deep down, we'd love to have done a physical, seminar and invite you down, obviously. But we just thought, you know what, let's see what we can do. Allah tests us in different ways. He's the best of planners, and I think alhamdulillah for technology and the time zones worked out as well for a lot of people. So thank you those who obviously different time zones and it's inconvenience, apologize for that one. So thank you so much again. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Kareem to everybody. Thank you, Shahbaz. And then in terms of from Emerald Network perspective, again, thank you again. Yesterday we had a webinar preparing for Ramadan. Today was almost specifically to do with the planning aspect, the isolation notion. And tomorrow we're doing a Muslim lifestyle one. So preparing for Ramadan, the current economic climate, look at the different sectors of the halal economy. So got special guest range from Islamic finance, halal travel, modest fashion. So that should be a really, really good one. So same time tomorrow, 6 o'clock. And in the meantime, look out for the social media. Do follow Shahbaz, obviously, in terms of at Ramadan Legacy. We'll be double checking and sharing those tags, and any future graphics we'll tag one another in as well. So thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks.